Week, what are we going to hear
All
about?
right. So this week, you might be a bit of a series here. I'll see how we go. But I've been listening a lot to this. I discovered this podcast called the Rugby League Digest. Now, I'll put a link into the description here. These guys have put together a series on the Super League War, which it's very comprehensive. They do a prelude. They talk about the 70s and how that led to what happened in the 80s, which then what happened in the 90s. And there's about 35, 36 one-hour episodes about this, and I'm about 12 episodes in. And so they've been mentioning the South Queensland Crushers. Now, that is a team that has a very close to my heart. So I was thinking maybe we could, over the next couple of weeks, look at some of these fallen away clubs, or these, not so much talking about like your Newtown Jets or your North Sydney Bears, looking at these like clubs that sort of popped up for a couple of years and then just, short-lived around that Super League wartime. And maybe we can just have a look, quick profile of those clubs. So the South Queensland Crushers are very close to my heart because when I was a kid in 97, 98 actually, I was following the Storm, and I bought ARL 96, EA Sports ARL 96, and I didn't want to play as any other club because I didn't like any other club. I only liked Melbourne Storm. So because I never supported a club before Melbourne Storm, and so I picked the South Queensland Crushers because they weren't around anymore. So I thought, I'll just pick this team because they don't exist. So that's why they're kind of my second team if I was to ever have a second team. So what I'll do is hang on, oops, what have I done? I'll share my screen quickly. I've got a couple of photos just to take it off, our face. There's South Queensland running out. So where do we begin with the South Queensland Crushers? Do you still see the photo yet, Dubs?
I can see the folder full of the photos there, mate.
Excellent. So, let's start with the name and the logo. So if we, look at, there we go. There's their logo. It's a train and they're called the Crushers. Do you remember anything about the Crushers? Do you remember because we were like about 10 years old when they were probably around? Do you remember anything?
Let's see. Their final season was, of course, 97. No, I remember I was, 11 at the time. Before the Storm had come along. And while I certainly wouldn't mind watching a bit of NRL as a kid, wasn't on much on TV. And I didn't really have a team because I didn't care until the Melbourne Storm came along. No, I remember very little apart from the fact that they're a name in the back of my mind, not unlike, say, the Western Reds or the Illawarra Steelers or something like that. Teams that came and went fairly briefly in the 80s and 90s and kind of haven't been seen since Super League Wars. So, yeah, as I look back on it, mostly what I know about the South Queensland Crushers is what you talk about because they're one of your fond conversation topics. I am going to say that South Queensland logo, and I'm not sure if you've double clicked on it, but it's not popping up on my screen as being big. It's just the icons. But that South Queensland Crushers logo.
Is that open now?
Nope. My screen might have frozen. Anyway, if you're seeing what I can see, folks, you're seeing, you'd be seeing the logo as a thumbnail, but just wait for you to, yes, there we are. That's come up perfectly. So that must be one of the most, if not the most underrated sports team logos ever. That is a big bugger of a train, and I just like it. I love that there's a massive train crushing things. And they're just the name, the Crushers. It's just so brutal sounding.
There's meaning behind the name. And this is, I only discovered this after having this whole obsession with this club ever since 1998. I only found this out this week, actually, when I was doing a bit of research. So, so my only real memory is I didn't, follow NRL, if the grand final was on or state of, you might there's rugby league going on. And I still remember there was a kid at my school that played in the Victorian, under 12s rugby league side. And I'm like, what's rugby league? Anyway, so I just remember hearing on the news, blah, 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 and the Crushers. The Crushers, what a cool name. How cool is that as a nickname? And then, you see their logos, this train, a train? What does it come from? So where, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is accurate. So the Crushers is a reference to the Queensland sugarcane industry. So there's a season when they have to crush the sugarcane. So I think they harvest it and they crush it before they then refine it. I don't know anything about how you produce sugar. and and there's all these there's these hundreds and probably thousands of kilometres of train track in Queensland that has been laid down just to transport this sugarcane from the farms to the mills during crushing season. And so if we look at this photo, that's actually a sugar, and if you see the tracks, that only sugarcane crusher trains can actually go on those tracks. So that's where the crushers apparently got their train and crushers and sugarcane and Queensland sort of theme. So I never realized there was a lot of, I thought it was just like some gimmick, like, oh, crushers, we're going to crush them. So that's where we're starting with there. So there was a bit more meaning and thought going into their logo and name than what I suspected anyway. So obviously the crushers came into existence at the end of 1992. So the NSWRL at the time said there's going to be 4 teams starting in 1995, one based in Townsville, which is obviously the Cowboys, one based in Auckland, which are the Warriors, one based in, who else came in 95? Perth, which was the Reds, which is another club we need to talk about in the coming weeks. And obviously the second Brisbane team, South Queensland Crushers. I don't think the Crushers got off to a great start because, again, this was all in the background of the Super League war where there was all this talk about rationalisation. We've got to merge clubs. There was 20 clubs in 1995 and these new clubs coming in. And so there was talks about merging with Gold Coast apparently before they even played their first game. So you're not getting off to a great start when people are already suggesting you should merge. Interestingly enough, their first season, 1995, they averaged 21,000. Like, that's phenomenal. Like, there was clubs in Sydney struggling to get 10,000 to a game, and they're pulling 21,000 to a game as the second Brisbane team as well. The Broncos were already, won the premiership twice, had been around for about 7 years. They didn't have a huge successful season, and then 1996, that dropped to 13,000. And then the Super League war came. The Super League war, I guess hit it came to a point where there was two leagues. And 1997, they only averaged 7,000. So there was potential there for the Crushers in the early days. They even got, their worst crowd was 2,300 in 97. Now, despite getting such good crowds in 1995, they were bleeding money. From a business point of view, they were really poorly mismanaged. And Scott Sattler, who was a player there in 1996, apparently he's told us this story where they're at training. I think it was pre-season or early in the season. The owner just comes to all the players like, listen, guys, you have to play for free. We got no money. But there was a mysterious donor was found who helped sort of pay the players for 96. And they were going to pull the pin at the end of 96. But again, this mysterious donor chipped in for the 97 season. They did have some, despite winning the Wooden Spoon in 96 and 97, they did have some success in the lower grades. They won the under 21 premiership in 96 and then they won the reserves in 1997. So they had some talent coming through. You'd imagine being based in Brisbane, there'd be a lot of talented players there. But yeah, that was the brief and short history of the Crushers. And in 2014, they actually had a 20-year reunion. No joke. They actually, the players and officials and all that got together and held a 20-year reunion. So, and the best thing the Crushers gave us was Aaron Newell. Aaron Newell came straight from South Queensland and was in our first ever squad in 98. So there you go, a bit of South Queensland history. Now, here's some photos. And here's Sam Newman. This is back in 94, 95 when they were announced. And he was doing like a cross feed with the Brisbane Rugby League footy show. So he was getting in the spirit then. And here's a picture. And if you just look here, I think that's Aaron Newell right there.
Looks like him. Those eyebrows are familiar.
Yeah. And that's it. So that's the South Queensland Crushers, one of ARL, NRL, NSWRL's, one of the casualties of the Super League war, I guess you could say. So
well, they certainly have a fun little place in history there, more than just a footnote. And they did give us Aaron Newell, premiership player in 99, and part of those early days of Melbourne Storm. One of my favourite Sports Tonight quips back in the day by Tim Webster. Aaron Newell, no mule with this runaway try. And he did have some pace, Aaron Newell. So that's a fun little one.
And just finishing up on that, so I should mention, again, listening to this Rugby League Digest podcast, they said that the Broncos are just pretty much did everything they could to make sure the Crushers were a failure.
Yeah.
Broncos have always been very self-interested, and if you listen to this podcast, they're probably the main reason the whole Super League war happened. They're one of the main catalysts. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Let's finish off with some memes, shall we?